The drop in CTA ridership during the pandemic was not citywide, according to a new study. The Urban Institute found that while downtown ridership decreased, neighborhoods with more Black and Latino residents saw more sustained ridership. And joining us to talk about what it could mean for Chicago's transit future are Aaron Alleman, Executive Director of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and Olatunji Obai-Reed, President and CEO of Equiticity. Welcome back, both of you, to Chicago tonight. And before I ask any questions, let's take a look at some of the findings from that study in terms of stations that lost the most ridership versus the least. So, largest decline, Merchandise Mart, Addison, Red Line, Monroe, Blue Line. And then the smallest decline, Pulaski Blue Line, the Conservatory Green Line on the west side, Central Green Line also on the west side. Obai-Reed, what do you make of these findings?
Sure. Well, the findings in many ways tell us what we already knew. The people who are the most dependent on transit in our region are Black and brown, low to moderate income, and live on the south and west side. And what the pandemic showed us is that we are often the ones who are in the role of essential workers. We don't have the luxury of working from home. We are on the front lines every day and require transit to live our daily lives.
Aaron Alleman, is that how you see it? This is essentially showing the so-called essential workers who rely on transit, they're still using transit versus folks that perhaps could afford to stay home?
That's exactly what we're seeing here, Paris. And I think what is of keen interest to us is trying to understand what transit looks like and ridership looks like post-pandemic, because it is a crucial part of our economy and the way people get to the jobs that exist here in our region. But understanding, what percentage of white-collar workers are going to shift and really understanding how that reliability and service can continue to serve and be enhanced for people who are transit dependent.
And we should mention that this study shows similar results in other big city transit systems as we're seeing here in Chicago. So, Obai-Reed, what should this mean in terms of transportation policy starting now and going forward?
It underscores the vital importance of operationalizing racial equity in our transit system here in the region. Every agency that's executing around transit should have an operational commitment to racial equity. And the fundamental way that this plays out is in the distribution of resources. What this analysis shows us is that those who need transit the most should receive the most resources in terms of transit, ensuring that it is meeting the needs of Black, brown, low to moderate income people on the south and west side.
And Aaron Alleman, how does that translate to specific projects? What are the specific needs right now?
Well, I think we need to think about some of the connections that need to be made in our transit system. For example, you can take a job in a city if you're going to work in transportation, logistics, and warehousing, but you can't get that last mile from that transit station to that place of employment. And so one of the things that we're hopeful that the infrastructure bill at the federal level that was just passed will help us find ways to, support bus service perhaps from the end of the lines to those jobs that exist, that will help us invest in walkability and bike infrastructure that will help people get to the places that they need to go at the end of the lines, but better connect the system throughout from bus to rail.
And Obai-Reed, one of the big projects that's been talked about and planned for years is the extension of the Red Line to 130th. So if you had the mayor's ear, what would you tell her in terms of how some of this federal infrastructure money should be spent on CTA projects?
Well, we need the Red Line extension. The reason that the Red Line stops at 95th is a result of structural racism in Chicago. We needed to extend to the further south outskirts of Chicago. And what I would tell her is that quality transit helps improve life outcomes for people. It helps improve educational outcomes, health-related outcomes. All number of outcomes are lifted up when quality transit is present in neighborhoods. So I would encourage her, should she believe in her commitment to racial equity, it should be reflected in that federal money coming down to the region, to the city, have a racial equity lens attached to it, and Black and brown-led community-based organizations are part of the conversation that decides how those resources are going to be distributed in our region.
Obviously, that red line extension, a very important project. Aaron Alleman, on the flip side of this, if you look at the stations with the most declining ridership during the pandemic, not surprisingly, the loop stations with fewer people going to downtown offices for work. And now companies are saying this is going to continue. This might be the new normal, more people working from home. So what does that mean for the public transit system writ large?
Well, a couple things. We were looking at prior to the pandemic, what the percentage of the workforce was that was going to be able to work from home. And so when we ran these numbers before the pandemic, we were thinking maybe 10% of people would be working from home. When we're running those numbers today and looking at where people are working right now, we think in some places across our region, it's going to be 35% of jobs will be working from home on any given day. But, I think the real impact will be on our road system here that we see. If 25% of people don't go back to transit, we expect people will be stuck in traffic for another 192,000 hours, which equates to about $1.2 billion in lost productivity. And that's people and goods that can't get to the places that they need to go if we don't have a well-functioning transit system. And
not to mention the loss in revenue for that transit system. So then what is the solution to entice more people to transit if they're not going to their jobs on it anymore?
Well, I think we need to think about reliability of the system and, where the access is getting us to, so that more frequent service during the day to places that people need to get to. We're seeing daytime movements across our region increase. So while the morning peak hasn't quite gotten back to pre-pandemic levels, people are, taking their trips during the day. They're going downtown in their own communities to get lunch as opposed to in the central business district. So we really need to think through, what are the barriers to changing our transit system? And some of that is old formulas that drive the way that we spend our resources.
All right, a lot to think about. The transit, so important to the economy and the lifeblood of the city. And our thanks to Aaron Alleman and Olatunji Obai-Reed. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.